Executive Suite with WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi.
Welcome to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi. Good to have you with us. And this week we're going to have an interesting conversation about electricity. Not so much about your skyrocketing electric bills. A lot of people are concerned about that. But some of the new technology that's really going to impact how the electric grid works in the years to come. And we have a Providence startup, maybe a little older than a startup, but something like a startup right now here today. The chairman and CEO of Utilidata, Scott DePasquale. Scott, thanks for being with me.
No, thanks for having me, Ted.
So, I was reading about Utilidata to get myself up to speed on you guys. One of the descriptions I found said you are, quote, a leading supplier of voltage optimization and digital automation systems for the electric utility industry. That is a mouthful. So can you explain in layman's terms, kind of for the folks at home, what do you do at Utilidata? What's your business? What are you guys working on?
Yep, so we're a global software company, and we work with electric utilities to help them capture the value of information, give them access to information and data that they didn't have access to before. And we do that by deploying some advanced digital technologies that we've invented. And there's sort of three big things we do with that information. One, we allow them to reduce a lot of wasted energy on the grid. And we do that by automating processes and connecting devices and controlling and orchestrating how various devices responsible that they rely on for the delivery of electric power to the consumer. And we can save 3 to 5% of every kilowatt hour.
That's quite a bit for just putting in, some technology to watch how the grid is working and be able. But this is not they did not have that ability before in the utilities?
No, the utilities have very little connectivity on the distribution side of the grid. And so the power delivery system, they know there's a power outage because you pick up the phone and you call your utility and you say, our power's out. So there's not a lot of communications
capabilities. They don't get a feedback that says, hey, Charleston's out during the snowstorm or whatnot?
Some utilities have it. Most utilities in the U.S. and frankly here still rely on you calling them.
Wow. Or watching Channel 12 maybe when we get the call.
Or watching Channel 12.
So you're helping them control and make better, smarter use of what's going through the grids by getting your technology in at different points, and you guys are tracking it in a way they couldn't before?
Yeah, our software automates their processes. So our software will take control of devices. We will manage voltage that was otherwise a manual process before they deployed our product, and that helps them do a few things. So we optimize and manage the voltage. That creates the energy savings. That creates the efficiency opportunity. And it also allows us to coordinate and orchestrate the transient voltage levels across the system so that we can introduce more renewable energy. And so when you add wind or solar or electric vehicles, those have disruptive impacts on operations, right? And so our control systems allow them to integrate those resources without having to spend a lot more money to do it.
So your customers are the electrical utilities, right? National Grid, people like them?
Yes, that's right. And large industrial customers that have their own generation.
I see. So anybody who's doing power generation and distribution themselves, you help them figure out how to do that well. So is your software being used in Rhode Island yet?
It is. We're in the middle of a 7-figure deployment here in Rhode Island, and we're in discussions with National Grid on the opportunity to do a broader statewide rollout.
So if you can concretely give us a sense, so National Grid or whoever, I don't want to force you too much into the grid conversation, but if I'm at a utility that's deployed you, and I'm electrical utility guy during a snowstorm or whenever, and am I watching now sort of a dashboard of what's going on with the grid that I didn't have before, and then I can make decisions, or is it mostly all happening automated and there's no person needs to be involved?
Yeah, there's very little actual people involved in the engagement. So you deploy our software, it monitors and takes control of devices, and it can the data that we're collecting can be available for analysis. We're going to make available to them data that they can go back and rely on and measure system performance. They're going to have better visibility into how their assets are performing. Frankly, we are now working with a large defense contractor and a couple of our large customers to deploy a security application that will allow them to surveil the system in real time for hackers that might be trying to change voltage levels or create conditions precedent for, say, a rolling blackout, now that we know that the grid is a real target. That that application that'll roll out later this year will have a user interface that they'll be able to see and monitor. But most of it happens autonomously without a lot of need for the user to engage.
So we've all heard a lot about the smart grid. Is this the smart grid happening before our eyes with your technology?
This is the smarter grid.
Okay, how so?
Well, the big invention here was to take advantage of the decreasing cost to communicate with devices in the field. Right, and so now we're networking devices that weren't networked before, and we can control more field assets. We can get more feedback. We can do more with the data, and that is, I think one of the biggest challenges to modernizing the grid is not having an economic case to support investments in more sensors and in more communications technology. So. That's kind of been our big push. We wouldn't be able to create the value without being able to take advantage of communicating with all these devices, making them IP addressable, connecting them to the network, and taking control of it.
I remember from being reporting on it in 2009, there was some of the stuff in the stimulus law, was trying to push forward on different changes in smart grid things like that. And I know there have been other efforts. How much has all the way that the electric grid works and the way the utilities manage this changed in the last 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years? I'm not sure what the time frame is.
Yeah, it's a slow-moving industry. I think there's a joke that if Alexander Graham Bell woke up today from the dead, he would have no idea what your iPhone is. He'd have no idea how it communicates. He'd have no idea how it works. But Thomas Edison could come back today and run a utility.
Really?
There's not much has changed in 100 years. I think over the last decade, there have been incremental advances that have been important, right? We're seeing National Grid and American Electric Power and Pacific Gas and Electric deploy smart meters, giving consumers more information about their power usage so they can manage their behavior. If they're interested in efficiency and economic savings that go along with it. But that's been the extent of it. There hasn't been a large deployment of digital technologies to the distribution side of the business.
So our average executive suite viewer is probably doesn't own an electric utility or have their own distribution system. But do you think over time, I assume if National Grid is saving money or a utility like them with your technology, it'll feed through to what ratepayers? It's a money saver in the end for everybody involved?
It does. It impacts the consumer in a few ways, right? The consumer doesn't have to change their behavior, and they'll see on average a 3 to 5% reduction in their energy bill if we deploy it system-wide. But the impact on the environment and the ecosystem is big. It's the same as converting every year 5 million incandescent light bulbs to compact fluorescents. Or it's like taking 36,000 vehicles off the road from an environmental impact. That's, if you looked at on average for the nation, for 1 million people, that might be 170,000 metric tons of CO2 abatement, right? And so I think it impacts people directly economically. I don't think they have to spend a lot of money now, given what the cost structures are with advances in the communications technology. And I think it's important for the economy. It allows us to defer some investments in either coal or gas-fired generation that we might have otherwise had to invest in as a state.
Fascinating. All right, we're going to talk much more about this with Scott DePasquale from Utilidata, but right now we're going to take a break. Stick with us on the other side. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nisi, and we're talking this week about power and electricity. Not power like we talk about on Newsmakers, but the electric grid, bringing it into your house. And we're talking with Scott DePasquale. He is the chairman and CEO of Utilidata, a company in Providence that deploys software that helps big generators like utilities and others figure out how to manage things better. So how is that business going for you guys, Scott? You came to a big hubbub in 2012. I remember the press conference, I believe, and everything when you opened up. How's business a couple years in?
Raging. We've got, we took 3 people from Spokane, Washington. We moved them here with the help of a few big customers. We launched the product, a new version of the product that had existed. Recruiting has been the heavy lift, but, we now have a fully functioning company. We've doubled our bookings every year in our revenue, so we're generating cash. We've onboarded some of the largest utilities in the world, including the government government of Saudi Arabia through Saudi Aramco and now Saudi Electric Company, and doing a lot of work here in the States.
Now, the Saudi Arabia thing fascinates me because I think of Saudi Arabia, if anyone has an interest, not just plunging as much raw energy into the grid and spending that money, it would be big producers of energy like Saudi Arabia. What got their interest on this?
Well, you know, the Saudis were looking for energy conservation opportunities because, as it turns out, they're using diesel fuel and other fuels to generate electric power to drive refining, processing, gas processing, and you know the whole electrical infrastructure to support oil production is expensive. So every hydrocarbon and every molecule that goes to the generation of electricity is cannibalizing oil they can sell. And you know, as it turns out, they're going to need to be thoughtful about that over the next 20 years to stay competitive. So they had reached out to us when they learned about the technology and how we were deploying it with American Electric Power and National Grid, and so since then they are actually going to be one of our largest customers.
Fascinating. So give us a little bit of the origin story. You mentioned coming from Spokane. We're going to talk about what brought you here, but you know, what were they doing in Spokane? What was the original impetus for all this that got the company started way back?
Yeah, and so I was, you know, before I stepped into CEO, I was a venture capitalist, and I'd been working with a few very large utilities to make some strategic investments in technologies that mattered. And American Electric Power, which is a big Midwest utility, had some demonstration projects with the technology in the company in Spokane that preceded Utilidata, and they asked me to go take a look at it. And there were a dozen folks that had done an outstanding job developing some very novel approaches to grid efficiency, and AEP really liked the idea of deploying that at scale, but it wasn't a real commercial organization. And so, in partnership with AEP and then later National Grid, we acquired that company and moved it out here, and some of our big prospective customers asked me to step in to build the organization, and I was thrilled to do it. You know, I'd spent 10 years scouting for technology. I did it for GE. I did it for this large private equity company, frankly, one that the state had a vested interest in. And you know, I hadn't seen a lot of opportunities that had a really great economic value, that had a quick payback that we could measure for the consumer, that allowed access to this data that we could do something with.
That's fascinating. So you moved from Spokane to Rhode Island about 3 years ago now, right?
Right.
It would
Yep.
be. So what did lead you to move the company, or what brought you to Rhode Island?
Well, so we weren't going to be able to recruit the talent we wanted to recruit in Spokane. We wanted to be closer to some of the core customers we knew we were going to get some early large orders from. You know, after that, the most important thing was where could we recruit top talent? And we looked at a few different places. We looked at Raleigh and Atlanta, Georgia, because there was a burgeoning community academically and professionally of folks investing in smart grid technologies. We love the Boston ecosystem. There's a lot of great talent born out of MIT. There's a lot of clean tech and energy startups there. And we look, you know, I had a few years before moved back to Rhode Island. I grew up here.
Cranston, right?
I grew up in Cranston. Yeah, I spent most of my professional career in other places. But when we moved back here, we were living here, and I said, well, we should consider Rhode Island. The state had an investment in the private equity fund that we acquired Utilidata through, and Governor Raimondo, then Treasurer Raimondo, had spent a bunch of time with me talking about some of the benefits of being here and get me thinking about it. And you know, what we learned, Ted, was it is very expensive. If you need to build an R&D capability and you need bricks and mortar, it's very expensive to be in Raleigh. It's very expensive to be in Boston.
Because they're so congested with companies.
They're so
like
congested, and there are 50 companies in line, right, in the various economic development councils to get some kind of funding. Within a month of us talking to then Treasurer Raimondo, her staff helped facilitate for us a relationship with the then EDC, now Rhode Island Commerce. We got a $500,000 loan in 45 days that helped us accelerate the amount of people we could hire, right? And we would not have hired as many people as soon as we did without that additional funding. So we went above plan on how quickly we hired, and we pay half of the dollars per square foot of being in any of those other ecosystems. And so we were, you know, we were pretty confident that with Brown University, the engineering expertise there, URI, and frankly only being an hour away from Boston, that we were going to be able to recruit that talent. And you know, we scaled up quickly. quickly. We moved people here. We ultimately brought people from San Francisco, the Bay Area, from Maryland. We brought folks from Boston, from Chicago. We found ultimately that it was less expensive to live in Rhode Island. We were paying very competitive technology wages, right? We're significantly high-paying jobs, I think, relative to the region. So you could move here and have a great lifestyle. And you know, the folks that did move, they love it here. They love the restaurants. They love Providence. They love the beaches. And so the quality of life, you know, I think if you talk to the folks inside our company, you'd get pretty rave reviews about, you know, the quality of being here. And there aren't that many tech jobs like this here. So
at the same time, did you have any reservations? Rhode Island's always beating itself up when it gets a low ranking on some business ranking or anything. Did you have concerns about that kind of stuff that gets national headlines for the state?
You know, I didn't as much. You know, one thing that gave us confidence is the leaders in the state stepped up, and this was important. And, you know, look, we weren't the largest company that was going to create the most amount of jobs in Rhode Island, but we were in high tech, and Governor Raimondo stepped up, and, you know, she would come meet with our prospective employees when we were recruiting. Everybody in the delegation, Senator Reid, Senator Whitehouse, Congressman Langevin, showed up and spent hours, and I don't mean 30 minutes, hours, and they'd walk around and talk to the employees. And so we had everybody engaged. That gave the board members and folks a lot of confidence to continue to reinvest here. So no, you know, we did get some interesting comments from Silicon Valley. You know, I spent 10 years before this in Silicon Valley investing in startups, scouting for technologies, and, you know, everything about Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley. So they, you know, our friends there told us we'd never be able to recruit. As it turns out, the irony is it is very hard to compete in Silicon Valley because there are so many other tech companies. We actually think we have an advantage being here.
Interesting. All right, we're going to take another break. When we come back, we're going to talk more with what Utilidata is doing to get maybe more employees for the future and much more. So stick with us on Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi, and we're talking with the chairman and CEO of Utilidata, Scott DePasquale. They're a Providence startup company that software management. They help utilities and other big energy users figure out how to do a smarter deployment of those resources. So, Scott, you published an op-ed in the wake of the cyber attack on Sony, and you warned about, quote, the potential for an attack on the electric grid. How big a threat do you think that is?
It's a big threat. You know, I think in the last year there have been several hundred incidences reported on hacking or attacks on mission-critical infrastructure in the United States. Almost half of those have been focused on the electric grid. So it's a focus area when there's a relationship change between countries, the geopolitical influences that create these opportunities for cyber hackers to attack countries, whether it's state or non-state actors. That's really important to utilities now. Now utilities have a stake in the global game because they're the biggest target.
Now, how much on the one hand, someone could say, well, you're actually going to make it easier for them, your technology, because it connects everything together, which is the payoff. But how much are there ways your technology, you're making the pitch, can help these folks who have these concerns to avoid a cyber attack? Yeah, that's right. I mean, look, when you connect devices to a network, you have an increased threat surface. Right, and so there now, traditionally the cyber issues have been espionage, stealing IP, denial of service, shutting access down to your network that could cripple and cause a lot of damage to companies, but it typically hasn't been kinetic. And I think with a lot of these automation devices being, like ours being deployed, now a nefarious actor, a hacker, could hack into a system and actually change voltage levels and actually move things around. And so we had to turn that liability into an asset. And so we started working with members of the defense community to use that information that we get as a real-time surveillance tool for our utilities to see activity that might not be legitimate, to see people operating on the grid in this kinetic way. And I think that's going to become really important. And I said the good news is utilities have $1 trillion worth of upgrades to do over the next year. They're going to have to rely on this advanced technology. Automation is going to play a key role. You cannot air gap every system. It's just not a scalable thing. So, at the end of the day, if you're running our system, then you're going to be able to do surveillance
that's going to capture any other investment in technology that you make, you're going to be able to protect if you've got our system running.
Now, you're also getting ready to announce a new effort to support Girls Who Code. What is that, and why are you getting involved?
Yes, Girls Who Code. So we're about to do the largest utility industry conference, at least in North America, is Distributech. It's happening out on the West Coast in San Diego, and we're going to contribute $20 for every visitor to our booth to Girls Who Code. And it's important. Women are underrepresented in the STEM fields, and for us making that investment, some of our most talented developers are women, and there's for the percentage of women in the workforce, there's not an equivalent percentage working on engineering and math solutions, and so that's a place where we're going to be active.
We were talking earlier about Governor Raimondo's involvement, how she helped to woo your company here. She's obviously taking over now, she and other state leaders. Do you have any advice or thoughts on what they should focus on to help improve the business climate in Rhode Island? What would make a difference?
Yeah, I think she's doing what she needs to do. She's present and engaged. And she spent a lot of time with us. I know she's talking to other companies, and I think it's the public-private partnership. I think those two need to come together to create the ecosystem that creates jobs, and I think she's already doing it. And I think you have a willing delegation. I think Rhode Island is in a remarkably better position today with the evolution of our leadership than it has been in a very long time. And I think you'll see business leaders sense that and be confident, and I think you'll see people come here in the next few years.
You had a great quote in a recent issue of Bryant's Alumni Magazine. They were talking to entrepreneurs, and you said you've invested in 18 companies since graduating, and how many succeeded?
A few.
A few, which would be 3.
We made more money on the few than we lost on the broader amount. That was the key.
What was your lesson you were trying to put forward with that? You would be a good ball player with that average. But
you have to step up to the plate. You need to take risk if you're going to evolve and push, particularly in technology, right? It's a risk-taking environment. Not everything is going to work out. It comes down to the people you can recruit, but you have to be bold enough to accept failure, and you have to be really objective in how you look at things. And we were fortunate. It was a lot of smart grid technologies and a lot of lessons learned to get to Utilidata. I stepped into this one as CEO because it was different than the others I'd been involved in, right? But you got to be able to accept failure if you're going to take risks.
We only have about a minute less, maybe a little less than that. Last year, you mentioned Senator Whitehouse. You were his guest to the State of the Union, and it seems an appropriate week to ask, what was that like, that experience, to go to the State of the Union as a guest of a senator?
It's a big deal, to sit in that room at the Capitol and observe the country's leadership engaged. That's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. I really enjoyed that.
Did you watch this week and you had fond memories of your time in D.C.?
I did. I was lamenting not being there this year, so I called up Senator Whitehouse and asked him why he didn't invite me again, and he said, "Scott, I can't take you every year."
I can't take you.
I'm only kidding. No, but yeah, it was. And I'm glad the president talked about cybersecurity, by the way.
Yeah, he did. He mentioned that was a big deal for him in this speech, so it sounds like you guys will be involved. All right, that's all the time we have. Scott DePasquale from Utilidata, thanks so much for joining me, and thank you for joining us for this conversation. Be sure to come back next week. Our guest is going to be the chairman of Twin River to fill us in about why they have changed their tune from Exec Suite a year ago, and they want to build a hotel up in Lincoln, and how the outlook is with those casinos coming online in Massachusetts. So you won't want to miss that. Be with us next week for that conversation here on Executive Suite. I'll see you then.